Well, I have 1 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here, and hopefully I won't miss anyone that's coming in to click them in here. Uh, so let me go ahead and fire this up. Can you guys see that in the presentation mode?
Yes.
Great, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. This is, of course, December 2024. Hard to believe we're almost at 2025. It's just amazing to me. Well, as normal, this webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at WKU in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production and delivery of this webinar reflects the contribution of many partners committed to serving the needs of the Commonwealth. And I haven't cleared this with my cohorts, but I think we're going to bump the January 2nd meeting to the following week. I don't know how many will be around for a January 2nd call. So particularly since we're not looking at imminent drought in the next month. So I suspect we'll be meeting again on January 9th. And as normal, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later. And this webinar is also, of course, live streaming on YouTube. And this webinar will be archived. And the picture you see in the background there, that's from Wayne County just before Thanksgiving. And that kind of sums up our winters here in Kentucky. Overcast skies and usually not snow on the ground, although occasionally we'll get some white stuff. And as normal, we'll look at some recent conditions and impacts, and then we'll switch to looking at forecast and outlooks and then questions at the end. On the left there is just a sunset I saw a few days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, I guess now. Seen a lot of nice sunsets this past month. And it's nice to see some sun this time of year. And as normal with November's, I captured this back on, I want to say November, was it 18th? The date's on here somewhere. November 11th. This was a cold front that blasted through. What's shown here are the wind chills. As we'll see in a moment, we had pretty warm temperatures during November, but we did have a couple of cold blasts come through, and boy, did it feel cold. You see single digits as low as 9 degrees there in Western Kentucky, and as warm as 52 degrees, 56 degrees over in the southeast. So I just love these gradients that you get this time of year with these cold fronts coming through. So getting right to it, our November temperatures were quite a bit above normal. We topped out at an average of 51.6 degrees, which is 5 degrees above normal. And that means we had the fifth warmest November on record out of the 130 years of record keeping. And you see on the upper right chart is the T max for the month, the T min, and the lower left. And you really do see this 5 degree above normal temperatures are really driven by the large part the nighttime temperatures that were anywhere from 8 to 9, 10 degrees above average in spots. But even our daytime temperatures were still 2 to 3 degrees above, which gave us that 5 degree anomaly. And that was pretty much statewide, concentrated over the drier areas, typically south central Kentucky, but the whole state was above normal. You see the breakdown of the climate divisions there, 4.8, 5.5 over kind of west central, 5.2 across the bluegrass, 4.8 across eastern Kentucky. So pretty much warmth across the whole state. Now, if we expand that to include September and October, our fall was actually about 3 degrees above normal, but that gave us the third warmest fall on record. And again, that was pretty widespread, both daytime and nighttime temperatures, pretty even and pretty much statewide. And really, it was all 3 months were pretty warm. And the big news now is that as of November 30th, this year will rank as our warmest year on record in the 130 years of record keeping here in Kentucky. Right now, we're sitting at 2.5 degrees above average. Our all-time warmest year, 1921, sits at 2.4 degrees above. Now, we started off December cold, but that long-term forecast looks kind of warm. So we'll see how we end up. If I had to guess, I'd say we'll end as the warmest year on record. Last year was the fourth warmest, but that was only 1.7 degrees above normal. So right now we're sitting at 2.5. So we'll see where we end up. But potentially big news coming up if we do exceed 1921. But despite the warm temperatures in November, we still had a little snow sneak in. This is a picture from Lewis County back on the 22nd. And we've had a couple of snows since then. So even though it's been warm, we've still been able to manage some early season snow, at least early to me. This was sent to me by Chip. This was interesting because as of that time, Louisville had yet to reach 32 degrees. So his banana tree was still growing and flourishing, and yet they had this snow. I think the temperature there at the time was like 32 and a half or 33 degrees. So he had snow on top of his banana tree, but it was still growing and surviving. So I suspect that this tree is no longer growing after the last few days, but maybe next to the house there, it's still hanging on, but I kind of doubt it. Well, looking at switching to precipitation now, we've had a couple of relatively dry weeks. This is the radar estimates, Mesnet estimates from the last 7 days. Not a whole lot. You see a relatively weak band across central Kentucky, but otherwise not too much there. We expand that out to 2 weeks, still relatively dry for this time of year. You see Eastern Kentucky an inch to an inch and a quarter there, but most of the state relatively dry. You see less than a half inch over parts of the western half of the state. But then you expand that to the last 30 days, and you see along the Ohio River Valley some pretty healthy numbers there, 7, 8 inches for the last 30 days. Portions of central Kentucky, you see 4 to 5 inches. But the dry part of the state, and this will be the theme for today, parts of eastern Kentucky, especially that south central Kentucky, is really the driest part of the state, and it's remaining dry, and it has been dry for several months actually. We expand that out to 60 days, and again, our October was the second driest on record, so really not much change between the last 30 days and the last 60 days. And you still see south central, southeastern Kentucky relatively dry. And then we go out to 90 days, and that kind of pops out even more. Pretty healthy numbers across the whole state, and as we'll see, very average numbers for fall. But you see a few counties there in south central, southeastern Kentucky getting as little as half of the rest of the state. So you've got a core few counties there that are dry, but for the most part, most of the state has recovered pretty well following a pretty disastrous October. And had it not been for Hurricane Helene, we would have been in terrible shape in the fall. So again, looking at November numbers, overall, a pretty good month. But again, most of that precip falling along the Ohio River Valley. And as you get move towards the southeast, you see those numbers drop off and pretty dry along western Tennessee, which is creeping a bit into Kentucky there, where you see numbers of less than 75% of normal. And then again, you expand that to include September and October, and pretty healthy numbers statewide, and just a little dry across the south central portions of the state. But overall, right about average for this fall period. So getting to the numbers and the graphics there, the maps just pull out the September, October, November months separately. September and November being most close to normal or above normal. Um, yeah, looking at November, we averaged just over 4 inches across the state, which puts us actually 0.91 inches above normal. That's 123% of average. But when you break that down by climate division, you see the Western Climate Division received over 4.5 inches. That's over 2 inches above normal, nearly 150% of average. Whereas the Eastern uh, Climate Division was just under, well, a tenth under average at 97% of normal. So overall, they were a pretty healthy November, and that made it the 41st wettest um, November on record. And if you take again the whole fall period, September through November, we were right at average, just under 0.06 inches below the mean, which puts us above the median that gave us the 54th wettest fall on record. So we were above the median, uh, or right at that. Um, for rainfall for the fall. Even though we had that disastrous October, we still managed to eke out a pretty wet fall. Now, when we look at the country as a whole, we see that we were indeed blessed with that September and November rainfall because we're one of the few states with minimal areas of abnormally dry or moderate drought. And you go any direction from Kentucky and you're going to probably hit some drought, except for the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. It's dry out there, and this is an improvement over what it has been. Uh, you see in the past month or so, the eastern seaboard's really dried out, and then portions of the west are still battling some pretty strong, pretty moderate to severe, even extreme drought in a few cases. And again, zooming in on Kentucky, we still have this small area in south central Kentucky that's battling the dryness from Tennessee. But I think this should improve over the next several weeks as we see. And then West Virginia is still battling some long-term drought, which is why you see that drought in far eastern Kentucky, or at least abnormally dry conditions. And that's more of a hydrological impacts there. And if we look at the last month, again, the November rains have really helped. Across Kentucky, we went from abnormally dry to no dryness over much of the state, and that improvement's shown there over the last 4 weeks. But again, as the country as a whole has improved a great deal. It was a dry October almost the entire country, and November has really helped replenish a lot of that rainfall. You still see along the eastern seaboard that's drying out and portions of the south. And with a developing La Nina, we expect the dryness in the south to continue, although that should help portions of Kentucky. Now, looking at soil moisture, we're in good shape there. Some of the satellite estimates have us a little dry, but really, Kentucky's in good shape. Areas in Ohio further to the north are pretty dry, especially as you get into eastern Ohio and portions of Tennessee. But overall, Ohio Valley and Mississippi Valley is in good shape. If we look at the 7 and 28-day totals, stream flows, again, Kentucky's in good shape, except for, again, south central Kentucky, portions of southern Kentucky, abnormally dry. But again, this time of year, we're pretty low. Anyway, although we're starting to see a lot more rainfall on average this time of year. So you see a couple of stream flows, again, kind of reflecting what we're seeing in the rainfall patterns. And if you look at the evaporative demand drought index, it's pretty much reflecting what we're seeing in the rainfall pattern. The eastern seaboard's really battling some dry conditions, but overall conditions are improving here. And not a lot of evaporative demand this time of year with the short days, cool temperatures. And if we expand that out to the last 3 months, the northern plains have had some pretty dry conditions, and that's shown here, but that's improved pretty dramatically over the last month, 6 weeks. If we dive down into the soil moisture, we see that pretty much statewide, the soil conditions are as wet as they've been for since the spring. We recovered very nicely during October. You see at the beginning of the month, we were pretty dry and or very dry in many portions of the state, and the rainfall during the course of the past month have really helped really replenish the soil moisture at all levels. Um, all the way down to the 40 inches that we measure with a mesonet. So good recovery across much of the state. Turning to severe weather, since we're nearly at the end of the calendar year, I was happened to see some mamatas out on a walk November 18th. I think there were some other days where we saw hints of mamatas in the skies and so that got me thinking about, well, how did we stand for the year with regards to assuming we don't have any more tornadoes or severe weather? How do we stand for the year? And this is the Paducah office, and it turns out this is their fifth most active year, if you include severe and thunderstorm and tornado warnings. But they had a tremendously active May that and April that jumped their numbers up pretty fast. But fortunately, they've not had anything in the last several months, and so it looks very likely they'll end up as the fifth most active year for them. But as we move east, we see that from the Louisville office, they're right in the middle of the pack there, and right around just under 300, somewhere between 250 and 300. Well, no, I guess they're at 287 right now, and hopefully they'll end at that number. And if we go to the Jackson office, they're sitting at 150, which again puts them right in the middle of these numbers going back to the 1980s. So relatively average year for much of the state, unless you're in the western third, and then it was a very active season for them. Turning now to the ag impacts, of course, we're winding down, except for winter wheat. A lot of the crops are winding down. This was a snapshot from our Graves County mesonet station. And I can't tell if that's a cover crop there or not, or just but this was a nice sunny, clear day back on November 21st out west. The This was an interesting graphic showing an average topsoil moisture across the state, and you see just how dry we were during September, and then you see the improvement with Hurricane Helene, and then again you see the dryness due to the lack of rainfall during October, and then you see the recovery during November. So really an up and down fall as far as soil moisture conditions go, but we are on the right track again. And then the week ending the end of November 24th, for the most part, we were good. The topsoil moisture, 88% either in adequate or surplus, and then the subsoil, 75% is either adequate or surplus. So still room for improvement at the subsoil level, but definitely, I think after this week, we'll see even more improvement in the weeks ahead. And then pasture conditions aren't great, but they're not quite as good as they were earlier in November, mid-November. But I think again these will improve some. Pastures have pretty much stopped growing now, but after the latest freezes, but overall not too bad. The wheat condition is the winter wheat is fairly good, good to excellent. I think it's on average with prior years. Crop conditions good or fair is for livestock. Pasture wheat is pretty good. Uh, compared to previous years, I think it's close to average. One interesting side note, I was just reading about a terrible drought in, terrible ag conditions in Russia. They're having pretty severe inflation now, in part due to the drought and early frost that they've suffered across a large portion of Russia. So they're restricting their grain exports due to the bad growing conditions that they've had. So they're saying their winter crop is the lowest it's been in 23 years. So even though things are pretty good across much of the U.S., it's not the same around the world. All right, switching to looking ahead. This is the 7-day QPF, and it shows some pretty healthy rains across the south and into Kentucky. They're calling for over an inch and a half across at least the southern half of the state, with at least an inch or more over the rest of the state. So, and uh, and this will fall early next week if all goes well. So, some pretty healthy rains in the forecast. Hopefully, that forecast won't change. We could use the rain, and we'll see. As far as hazards go, nothing in the 0 to 7 days. In the 8 to 14, it looks like everything is going to stay well to our south or north. Some winds across the north, heavy snow across New England, potentially, but uh, nothing in our neck of the woods. So that's good news. Now, looking ahead, the 6 to 10 day, nothing out of the ordinary, near normal conditions for much of Kentucky. Maybe a little above normal for the eastern quarter of the state, but overall, uh, pretty much near normal temperature and precip expected. As we move into the 8 to 14 day, we see they're forecasting a ridge to build across the eastern portion of the country, and so they're predicting above normal temperatures to start settling in, and with near normal precip expected. And then as we go out, that should be not May, but December. As we looking ahead, it now this is a little outdated because these came out November 30th. I mean, they haven't updated them yet, but I suspect that we're under more equal chances for the remainder of the month and maybe even slightly warmer. And then equal chances for precip. Now, looking at the winter as a whole, we see that they're expecting warmer than normal conditions for this winter. Even though we've started off relatively cool, they are expecting warmer temperatures to settle in. This is largely driven by the La Nina forecast, which we'll get to in a minute, as is the precip outlook. And La Nina typically brings above normal precip for the Ohio Valley, and that's somewhat reflected here in the below normal forecast for this deep south and southwest, and above normal for the Ohio Valley and points north. And then as we look ahead, temperature-wise, for the spring and into next year, above normal temperatures for all of Kentucky for really the foreseeable future. But this is I mean, part of this is just they take the long-term trend and they extend it. So, we've seen increasing temperatures and they just kind of extrapolate that. But, you know, there's the La Nina neutral conditions playing into this as well. So we'll see. I don't put a lot of confidence into these numbers. Now looking at precipitation, you see the December in the upper left here, the winter outlook, and then the spring outlook. Here, both in winter and spring, this is reflecting developing La Nina with the above normal chances for precip over much of Kentucky. And that's also reflected in the drier conditions to the south, deep south. And then equal chances as we go into next summer because there's just not a lot of teleconnections that with a lot of impact there. And when we look at these chances, they're not real high by these standards. They are still predicting a La Nina to develop, but it'll be a weak La Nina if it does develop. And excuse me. And chances are we'll move into more neutral conditions as we go forward. If we look at the models, a majority of the models actually predict neutral conditions to persist, not even necessarily a developing La Nina by the numerical standard. You need, I believe it's 3 or more months of minus zero point 0.5 or below to classify that as a La Nina. And we're currently at, I think it's negative zero point 0.2. And so we could just stay in neutral conditions for the foreseeable future, but we'll see. If it does develop, I think it'll be a pretty weak La Nina. And what does that mean for Kentucky? Well, for much of the country, La Ninas bring above normal temperatures, but for the Ohio Valley, it means above normal precipitation. So what does a weak La Nina mean? Well, it varies. A weak La Nina has a bit more variability, but we still expect above normal rainfall, given the model forecast as they are right now. And here's the current drought situation, the forecast. The drought outlook for December, not much change from what we have currently, although they do expect the drought to persist across at least the northeast and the upper portion of the country. As we move towards winter, they expect a lot of the drought in the central portion of the state, of the country, to improve, but much of the deep south and much of the current drought they expect will continue. And again, a lot of this is driven by that La Nina forecast. And if we look at the fire potential outlook, that also reflects uh, the current conditions as well as that long-term forecast. Again, they expect the Ohio Valley to stay drought free and fire free, but the deep south they expect will dry out, and which will thereby increase their fire chances. Quite a bit of the country here under above normal conditions. So, in summary, a relatively wet September and November sandwiched the second driest October on record, leaving us with a near normal fall. And that was fortunate given how dry that October was. And again, how dry September would have been had we not had the hurricane. And then the soil and water levels are slowly recovering from the fall drought. As we saw with the soil moisture numbers, water levels around the state, we are slowly recovering. And with each new rainfall, that helps. Now, the big question for next month will be, will 2024 be our warmest year ever? And will the cooler December drop us to number 2? Well, even though, and I didn't really show pictures of this, but the forecast for the latter half of December is above normal temperatures. So if we have that, will we be the warmest year ever on record? And the answer is probably yes. So, but we'll see, because we're just a 0.1 degree ahead of 1921 right now. The prediction is for a weak La Nina to develop. We're under a La Nina watch at the moment, but it may not happen, but much of the winter forecast is based upon that developing. And I think even if it doesn't officially develop, I think, we are seeing cooler than normal sea surface temperatures, and so that is still having an impact, even though it may not be classified as such. So I think we'll still see some impacts, although they may be somewhat minimal. And again, the long-term forecast is for generally normal to above normal rainfall for the upcoming winter and spring with above normal temperatures. And with that, again, our next regularly scheduled webinar will very likely be January 9th. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Matt Dixon at U of K or Chip Zimmer at the Division of Water. And thank you for joining. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And any questions? And my apologies to John. I just saw that there was somebody to let into the webinar. Are there any questions? Any comments? I felt like it was a warm year, but I didn't realize we were on track to be number one. I thought we would fall closer to last year, number three or number four. But that warm fall really moved us up the rankings. Any questions at all?
Hey, Jerry, it's Shane. Just a few comments here, and this dovetails off of what you were discussing about how warm 2024 has been. Bowling Green set an all-time record for consecutive days above 32. That wound up being 244 days total. Louisville had 249 consecutive days above 32. That streak snapped when they dropped to 27 degrees back on November 29th. So that was not a record for them. The record there still stands at 257 consecutive days, way back in 1884. And then along those same lines, Paducah had their latest fall freeze on record. That occurred on November 26th.
No, thanks, Shane. Yeah, yeah. I know that the measurement is maybe slightly less long than the airport temperatures, but it was still a really long growing season compared to average. And Shane, I guess one thing that really struck me was, to me, it didn't feel like our summer was that hot. We didn't have a string of 100-degree temperatures. We didn't have, I can't recall terribly long heat waves per se, but it was those nighttime temperatures and just the consistency of the warm temperatures throughout the year that they could bump us to number one.
Yeah, that's true. It was kind of reflective of what we had a couple of summers ago in 22. We had a lot of warm minimum temperatures, maximum temperatures, not many that really stood out there. In fact, we had maybe 1 or 2 days there in August where temperatures got into the triple digits at a few of our mesonet sites. Central City and Muhlenberg County comes to mind. They hit
Hmm.
102, so that was our hottest mesonet temperature of the year, but certainly not the hottest ever recorded.
Hmm. Right, right. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I've got a student working on this, but I am curious how much of our fall precipitation was due to Hurricane Helene. And it'll be interesting to see those numbers, that percentage. It could be relatively high.
Mhm. I had
Any
a
other
question.
question? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much for doing this, by the way. I haven't really participated before, but I'm very happy that you're doing it. But here in Lexington and central Kentucky, we do have this sort of drought-related land, where there's, only a small layer of topsoil and then it's all clay and limestone underneath. So the water runs off into the streams and rivers pretty fast in this part of and just of Kentucky, and I just wondered if that was ever factored into how people look at droughts and so forth. Am I making myself clear? I'm not sure.
Yes, no, that's a great question. And I would say yes, it is, but indirectly because we we have a team that we discuss online each week about the conditions statewide, and the input from farmers at the local level really does have an impact on what we recommend for the drought status.
Okay.
So so hearing from the farmers on the conditions of the pastures and does make its way into the drought monitor.
Mhm.
We also look at the soil moisture readings from, say, the Mesonet and the satellite, and that captures some of that, at least the I'd say the root depth. Below that, not so much,
Right.
but at least within much of the root depth, we're monitoring those soil moisture data.
If you
Uh,
wouldn't mind, I had another question about Helene. I did some very, very rough calculations about Asheville. And
mm.
forgive me if this is out of bounds, but
Oh no, it's fine. Yeah.
no, so I did the calculations of how much hardscape had replaced hardwood in Buncombe County in this century. Again, a very rough, because I got the number from the Census Bureau, the number of new hotel rooms in Asheville this century, which was 10,000 or more, and another 1,700 under construction, plus another 80 acres of hardwoods that they took down to build the Sierra Nevada brewery and two other things on right on a hill right above the French Broad River. And so I took the calculation of what an average hotel would be in square footage plus parking lots, and I added all that up, the 80 acres plus all those hotel hardscapes, and it came out to 9.9% of the area of Buncombe County. And I wondered is, and the French Broad River does, it's not just straight down, it goes left, right, left, right, left, right. And I was told that the river was running backwards near that Sierra Nevada because the rain, the water running off the that hill was so powerful it acted like a dam and the water hit it and went backward. And so how
Mm.
much of the flooding of West Asheville had to do with maybe probably unintentional human building of taking out hardwoods and putting in hardscape
Right.
versus what would just be Helene herself.
Well, it's a great question. I mean, it's pretty common knowledge that as you build out the urban landscape, that your flooding becomes much more flashy. Because, like you said, that water can't penetrate it down into the soil, and it's immediate runoff at that point.
Right.
So you would expect at least some impact. And as you pointed out, there's been tremendous growth in that in the city. So,
Yeah.
I think you're onto something there. Now, the larger area had just, and maybe it's just some small percentage of impact when you have that much rain, but it would still be impactful.
And that's I was thinking it would be really interesting if an engineer versus me did that stuff because if that 10 feet of water, and I'm just referring to West Asheville, where I think it was over the banks, and I've been there many times in that area, by 10 feet, would it have been only 8 feet or six, or maybe not that much impact? Maybe it would be only 6 inches less flooding. But if it
Mhm.
was half as much, well, that would be a gigantic impact on all those people who lost their homes and all those art galleries and buildings and floating away things. I just ran into a friend of mine here in Lexington who'd been through Asheville, and he said it was like a bombed out zone like Berlin in World War II.
Hmm.
Um, so,
Yeah, well, I suspect there'll be a lot of studies on this case, and
well,
I
yeah.
suspect that,
But
yeah.
so my real question was, in Lexington, we have this conversation, or not much of one, about why protect the horse farms. And I'm thinking, well, let's forget about how pretty they are and let's forget about the work of raising horses and so forth. Are they really a bulwark against climate impact?
Mhm.
Should we look at it a different way?
Yeah, I would, it's very likely watershed dependent. Um, the cities make it work, urban areas, but it takes planning and it takes a lot of intentional, uh, a lot of intention. And I know some cities like Bowling Green here, they have a stormwater plan and there's a small tax that's added on and to people's water bills to help pay for that. So,
No.
I think it's a lot of planning. It can be done correctly, but Texas is a good example where they've had tremendous growth over the last few decades.
Hmm.
And each time a new neighborhood goes in, it floods a little different area each time because the water managers are, you know, they fix the problem and then new things are built and that it requires adjustments to the water management.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a cat and mouse game. Once the cat catches the mouse and the mouse runs away again and they have to keep at it. But it's definitely something to keep up with. And you're absolutely right. The horse farms and the farmland around urban areas help, no doubt.
Hmm. Thank you.
So, any other questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Hanukkah. And we'll see you guys hopefully January 9th.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Yep. Yep. Thank you, John. Thank you all. Yep. Bye.
Bye.